All right, gang, welcome in. I want to talk a little bit about the offensive coordinator position for the New York Jets. I think this is going to be a very critical piece considering some of the betting favorites for the Jets head coaching job are on the defensive side of the ball, particularly Aaron Glenn, who seems to be the leader in the clubhouse right now. So I want to talk about 4 offensive coordinators that I would like to see the Jets consider for that role in the event they bring someone in. Heck, these could be guys that are tied to Aaron Glenn right now, but they don't necessarily have to be. I don't think any of the offensive coordinators that Todd Bowles brought in had any ties to him at any point in his previous coaching experience. So these guys, while they are connected, some may not be. So overall, number 4 on my list, this is Ronald Curry. He is the current quarterbacks coach for the Buffalo Bills. If you really like Joe Brady, maybe this is your Joe Brady light that you might be able to bring in. This is a guy who actually coached with Aaron Glenn down in New Orleans. He was a wide receivers coach down in New Orleans. The guy was actually a former Raider drafted by the Raiders in the 7th round who played wide receiver for them for a bunch of years that became a quarterbacks coach I think it was just after Aaron Glenn left New Orleans. So that position kind of opened up. He goes there. So I don't know how much he knows him as like the quarterback side of things. This guy hasn't called plays, but Joe Brady plucked him off that Saints staff and brought him up to Buffalo this past year when he had his first full year as the offensive coordinator. So that to me at the very least says, well, the guy that's worked with him in the past clearly identified him as like someone worthy of being a quarterbacks coach after being a wide receivers coach his entire time with the Saints. So I think it's someone to absolutely consider, especially you pluck someone away from the Buffalo Bills, especially if Joe Brady winds up getting a head coaching job somewhere else, then the Bills are left without maybe 2 of their potential top options for calling plays up there in Buffalo. So Ronald Curry, number 4 on my list. Number 3 is an interesting name because it's someone who was a New York Jet at one point on our coaching staff under Todd Bowles, and that's John Morton. This was an offense that he had with Josh McCown and Robbie Anderson, and like they actually played really well. I thought this was like the best offense I had seen in like a very, very long time. He only had 1 year with the Jets, and then Todd Bowles was like, "You don't run it enough. We score too fast. We can't have you on the team." And I was like, "Why are we getting rid of this guy? This guy's turning like making magic happen with the staff we had or with the players we had at that particular point in time." He did overlap with Aaron Glenn both in New Orleans as well as in Detroit, and he's the current pass game coordinator for the Denver Broncos. So Sean Payton obviously liked him enough to have him in New Orleans and then also bring him over to Denver as well. So I think that's a nice veteran pairing that you could bring in with someone like an Aaron Glenn. Number 2 on my list is going to be someone that is near and dear to Jets' hearts, and there's not really any connection with Aaron Glenn, and that's Josh McCown. Josh McCown obviously is a big-time player in this league for 12 different teams. Was never like the juggernaut player, but he's just kind of that journeyman guy that spent like a year or 2 on every single team. He was essentially a coach on the field. The laundry list of quarterbacks that this guy has like worked with include names like, Kurt Warner, you had Jamarcus Russell, Matt Leinart, Sam Darnold, Deshaun Watson, Johnny Manziel, like literally the list goes on and on, but there's literally a ton of quarterbacks that were really young. And I feel like there's a reason when you have a guy that's on 12 teams brought in when they draft young quarterbacks, it tells me that the league recognizes this guy is good for young quarterbacks. And even though these quarterbacks are not turning into like juggernauts or like really, really good quarterbacks, like, yeah, some of them had some really good success, Deshaun Watson, Sam Darnold this past year, but like the nurturing environment that Josh McCown brings with him is a reason why the Jets paid him so much money to be a backup when we drafted Sam Darnold. And I feel like when you have a guy like that who understands 12 different teams across the league, 12 different ways that organizations do stuff, not to mention the 14 different offensive coordinators that this guy has played with, like some really, really good quarterback coaches, offensive coaches that like he has been in the room. There's like very few guys that are in a quarterback room that are going to be more experienced than Josh McCown. And for a Jets team that may wind up having a defensive head coach, it's probably good to have someone that has like a crazy ton of experience in quarterback rooms. Now, the downside to Josh McCown is he hasn't called plays before, but you have experience under Frank Reich and you have experience under Kevin O'Connell now. So like this guy just has a ton of experience that I'd be willing to gamble on the offensive coordinator side of it, especially like he may want to do this. One, because I think there is still a love for the New York Jets. The Jets paid him a lot of money to back up Sam Darnold. That's not normally the case in his career, but the Jets paid him a pretty good amount of money. Not to mention, like, there's still a lot of people within the Jets organization and this Jets front office that still really hold Josh McCown near and dear. We interviewed him as our head coach potential candidate as well, which I think is a nice tip of the cap for no other reason than like, hey, we want to get some info on you. We can interview you right now, see what your thoughts are on the position, and it helps him like in the long run too. Like if the Jets were not to maybe go with him as head coach or offensive coordinator, it's going to help him when other teams say, oh, well, he's been considered for like 2 different head coaching positions already. Maybe it's worth bringing him in. I think Josh McCown would be really well received here in New York. I would be willing to roll the dice on someone like Josh McCown as our offensive coordinator. The number one option for me, number one option for offensive coordinator, especially if Aaron Glenn gets this job, is Tanner Engstrand. And now, if you don't know who this is, I've only just started diving into him a little bit more, and I like the resume a lot. He was brought into San Diego under Jim Harbaugh when he was the coach there. He was a graduate assistant, then a running back coach, a quarterbacks coach, then an offensive coordinator and a quarterbacks coach, then an assistant head coach, offensive coordinator, and quarterbacks coach. This is all from 2005 to 2017. He was at San Diego. So he went right up the food chain there and became just not even just an assistant head coach, but like in charge of the quarterbacks and in charge of the offensive play calling as well. Then he gets pulled over to Michigan with Jim Harbaugh again, offensive analyst in 2018, before he becomes the offensive coordinator and running backs coach for the DC Defenders in the, what was that, the UFL or the XFL or whichever one was played in 2020 for one season. So he was calling plays there. So that's now 2 stints of calling plays. Then he goes to the Lions under Dan Campbell in 2020, offensive quality control coach, tight ends coach, and passing game coordinator, and then passing game coordinator for the Detroit Lions right now. And if you're telling me who I think the heir apparent to Ben Johnson probably is, it's probably this dude, the guy that Jim Harbaugh put a lot of stock in. Now, Aaron Glenn obviously has ties to him for the last few years being in Detroit. And I feel like there's this, concern that maybe he doesn't leave Detroit, meaning Tanner Engstrand. And that is certainly possible. But I think it's also, there's like this little bit of me that's not entirely sure Ben Johnson is definitely getting a head coaching job this go around. And it's not that I don't think he's going to get one or be offered one. I think he's being very particular on where he ends up and what kind of control he has. And like he had plenty of opportunities last year to go out and get a head coaching job and decided not to take it. So I don't know if it's fully locked in stone that that's going to happen. Heck, if you think there's like a chance that you could get this guy as your offensive coordinator, you hire Aaron Glenn and you say, hey, steal this dude right now before Ben Johnson commits, and you try to poach someone off that staff. I'm a big fan of the Lions and everything they did, turning everything around up there, because like if there's an NFC equivalent to what our New York Jets are, it is the damn Detroit Lions, and I am pulling for them in the worst way to win the Super Bowl, because it just means that there's some hope for us over here on this side of the NFL bracket, the AFC side. So guys, let me know your thoughts of my 4 offensive coordinator thoughts, and which one do you like the most? Is there a name that I left off this list that you'd like to see interviewed? Let me know in the comment section down below, and as always, go Jets! Jets!